Hello, folks. This is Kevin from Good Day, Good Prayers. This particular video is going to be life number 15. So it'll be the 15th in the life series. This is going out over DSR chats. Today, our video is called The Argument. Back in the 1970s, the shows that came out on television, especially the so-called family shows and the shows that were known as sitcoms, dealt with a lot of arguments. Now, on these shows, it was very interesting because you would have an entire cast of liberals. And this entire cast of liberals, some would pretend to be conservatives. But there was a problem. Nobody on the set was a conservative. And so what they had to do is they had to make up what the conservative would say. It was a lie. Now, they had a listening audience, a live audience, and as the liberal would make his agenda arguments, it would be just absolutely marvelous. And the crowd would roar and cheer and carry on. You would almost think that the liberals had won. Did they win? No, because there was no one from the conservative side actually represented on the stage. In fact, probably even in the background of the show, there was probably no one that was a conservative that was represented. And so they would just make up what the conservative would say, not knowing, of course, or I should probably say it, knowing, of course, that the conservative would have said something else. In those days, there was a man by the name of Lear. He was a liberal, called himself a Jew. I think he was a Khazarian. And I believe he was a liberal Satanist, because he wanted to make sure that the argument of the liberal got out and that it was out there without any competition. Interesting. Well, during the decade of the 70s, a lot of people began to think from the liberal standpoint. And of course, it helped them in political elections and so on, to actually have no one opposing them, even though they pretended there was opposition. There was none. The problem, however, and it became quite a problem, is that people began to figure it out. They come to the realization that the people who were supposed to be there, the people like Archie Bunker, for example, or anybody else on any show, were not really conservatives. And slowly, people began to realize that there were problems. Now, back at the time of Operation Paperclip, there was a project called Looking Glass. It was during the project Looking Glass that the liberals, the globalists, the deep state, all of those people come to the realization that they couldn't win. They wanted to do things the illegal way, but they couldn't win. Because why? Righteousness always wins over evilness. It's just the way it is. You might win a battle, you might win 2 or 3 battles, but you're not going to win the war. God is always going to win the war. And so it was at that point in time they needed to start to make their arguments uninterrupted. And so that's what they did. So what happens? Well, people began to realize that it was lies. They began to realize that it was not the truth. They had not the truth on those sets. And some of those shows actually went by the boards because people got to where they didn't want to listen to those shows anymore. One thing that they didn't realize, there were a lot more conservatives in the listening audience than they thought. So when people were watching their shows, well, they weren't buying what they were trying to sell. Well, praise the Lord. Today, over 60% of the population is conservative. Less than 30% of the population is any type of liberal. And now the liberals have gone out and they have murdered Charlie Kirk because they didn't want to hear his rhetoric. They didn't want to hear it. Why? Because it comes from the throne of God. Anything that comes from the throne of God, well, the liberals simply do not want to hear that. And so hear it they wouldn't. But killing him they did. This is Kevin from Good Day, Good Prayers. I want you to have a good day. And it's always going to start with your good prayers. And if they reach the throne of God, well, that's your key. You're going to have a good day. And you're going to have the longing of your heart, especially if it lines up with the heart of God. So with that said, you have a good day.